mourning the loss of our loved one, our family member, our friend, our co-worker, our brother. Holy Spirit, I pray that you just move through this room right now. Lord, it's a comfort that you already do. That you bring understanding that you already do. And we trust you that you will do that in the Lord. In the name of Jesus.
Everybody be seated. Thank you so much for coming today to honor the life of Michael Pierce. First, we will have Division Chief Mark Hildebrand come and say a few words today. So, sir.
We are gathered here today to remember and celebrate the life and career of Agent Michael Prince. I want to thank Chaplain Barganier for presiding over the services today. To the family, Dana, Donna, Jeff, Lynn, Adrian and his children, Mitchell and Lois, the Aurora Police Department expresses its sincerest condolences for the loss of Michael. Chief Wilson, who's out of state right now, regrets that she could not be here today, but wanted me to share her heartfelt and deepest sympathy for your loss. Mike was truly a special person who touched so many in this room in a positive way. I was one of those people who was fortunate enough to have been impacted by Mike's incredible life. Because of my relationship with Mike, I was asked to speak on behalf of the agency as his academy classmate, co-worker, and friend. It is truly an honor to stand before everyone here and talk about how great Mike was as a person and a law enforcement officer. Over the last week, I've had the opportunity to speak with Mike's family and close friends. I want to share some thoughts and stories about Mike. I'll begin with his amazing career. Mike started with the LAPD in 1997. In true Mike fashion, he announced to his family that he was joining the Los Angeles Police Department and moving to LA instead of finishing college. By the way, he was about a month away from graduation, and Jeff may have taken the blame for this career decision. For the next 5 years, Mike served with the LAPD before his eventual move back to Colorado and joining the Aurora Police Department. And by the way, he did finish college eventually. During his time in LA, Mike forged a lifelong friendship with his LAPD Academy brother, Eric Young. I recently spoke to Eric, a K-9 officer who is currently assigned to the bomb squad. Unfortunately, Eric couldn't make it today, but he expressed how much he wanted to be here with everyone to honor Mike. Mike and Eric had a unique and special friendship. They attended the academy together, went through probation together in Watts, the Southeast Division, and then were partners in the transit bus division. This is very rare in a department that size that you would transition through these various assignments and still remain together. Eric remembered how both of them shared their first pursuit together and built a close bond during this time. As law enforcement officers know, relationships change as assignments change. Eric said some distance grew between them when they changed assignments and when Mike moved to Colorado. But they soon reconnected and their bond became just as strong as when they were riding together in the streets of Los Angeles. Between family trips all over the country, work trips to LA, and Eric visiting Colorado during especially difficult times, Mike and Eric were the closest of friends. Eric remembers Mike as an incredibly genuine and humble person and a great friend. In 2002, Mike moved to Colorado and joined the APD. I was fortunate enough to be Mike's academy classmate, and I developed a friendship with Mike. As one of 4 laterals in our basic class, Mike was immediately seen as a leader and mentor. As many of you know, Mike was a phenomenal athlete. He always seemed to be in better shape than me, which I know may come as a shock to many in this room. I remember one story, well, there were many of them because we did several long runs in the academy, but many of you know Grant Heineman. When we started the academy, Grant was a collegiate athlete. Everybody kind of looked at him as kind of like an athletic specimen. He's sort of let himself go over the years, if any of you know him. But Grant was a phenomenal runner, and we used to do these long runs where we used to have the academy out. Many of you who are newer officers don't remember. It used to be on Montview, and we used to be in the old barracks. Many of you that knew Mike do remember where it was at. We used to run down Montview, and then we would go up Peoria to a trail and run and then come back. So about a quarter of the way was to when you would hit Peoria. Well, I was always towards the back, and as I was running, here would come Grant Heineman running, but right alongside him was Mike Prince. Mike stayed with him stride and stride, and when I talked to Grant said they would exchange finishing first. I would never know because I was never close enough to see. But I heard it became a friendly competition and maybe a serious competition between them. But I think that kind of shows the type of athlete Mike was. Just to highlight Mike's physical prowess, for a period of time, Mike held the record for the most push-ups in a minute, 110, which I think is pretty remarkable. It's almost 2 a second. Another funny story was at the driving track in Denver. Driving was fun, but it was pretty serious business. As we stood on the sidelines, one of the recruits in our class, who still works here, careened off the track and into a fence. As everyone is standing in dismay, knowing that we were probably going to get thrashed for what just happened, we're all just standing there in shock. And Mike, with a wry grin on his face, says, "Yep, that just happened." That was so Mike. Here are some of the descriptions for Mike that his classmates shared. He was a great friend. He was one of a kind. He had a presence about him. He'd always ask if you needed help. There was no one else like him. He was a leader, a mentor, a quiet professional, a tireless worker. He was steady, truly the best, a class act, and a standard we can all continue to work towards. Those descriptions are powerful and all true. After the Aurora Academy, Mike spent a short time on patrol before becoming an FTO in 2003. In 2004, he went to the narcotics unit. 2006, he became an FBI task force officer with the Metro Gang Task Force, and actually on one occasion got to fly down to El Salvador to present on the MS-13. Many close to him didn't even know that trip happened because he respected the secrecy of that assignment. In 2012, Mike promoted to agent and was assigned to General Investigations. 2014, Mike was selected to the Major Crimes Homicide Unit, which was the pinnacle of his career. Just last year, Mike was detailed to District 3 while he waged his war on cancer. I think it is important that Mike was only detailed to District 3 because Mike's actual home assignment remained major crimes, and because of that, he was able to finish out his career in the homicide unit, which would have meant a lot to Mike. What I remember most about Mike was his stoic demeanor and confident presence, which was laced with a remarkably keen sense of humor. During his time in the homicide unit, Mike developed some of the strongest bonds and friendships and brotherhood. As his family noted, the members of the homicide unit were his second family. Although Mike was dedicated to the men and women he served alongside, Mike always found time for his family. Whether it was fishing in Maine at a lake I can't even pronounce, running marathons, spending time outdoors, teaching Lois to drive, or attending Mitchell's hockey games, Mike was always intentional and committed when it came to spending time with his family, and he loved them so very much. That was the kind of person Mike was throughout his life and career. Even in the face of unbelievable challenges, Mike never gave up. He didn't know how to quit. My relationship with Mike was like any law enforcement friendship. The more you work around each other, the closer the connection. Although we never worked alongside one another on the same team, except for our first year, I always considered Mike a good friend. Anytime we crossed paths at work, we would always spend a few minutes checking in on one another. We would have a conversation about work or family and then go about our day. I always enjoyed running into Mike, and I felt like he too enjoyed our time catching up, because we would always part ways with an exchange of subtle grins. In closing, Mike should always be remembered for his intelligence, love of life, dedication to law enforcement, incredible will to fight cancer, undeniable strength, and intrinsic willingness to help out those around him. Just days before he passed, he contacted the sergeant of the homicide unit and asked if he could start working on a couple cold cases. That was Mike. He was truly a hero. Even under the most unfavorable circumstances and pain, Mike displayed unparalleled bravery, strength, and commitment and determination. Mike will be missed but never forgotten. His legacy and contributions will live on forever. Rest in peace, brother.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll hear from Matt. I might murder his name, but Fries. Is that right? Fries? Close enough? Correct me, please. I'm sorry.
All right. Yes, my name is Matthew Files, and I had the privilege of supervising Mike in the major crime homicide unit for the majority of his time there. I have also had the privilege of calling him a friend and a brother. It's an honor to speak with you all today on behalf of Michael David Prince, and I thank his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Prince, for entrusting me to properly honor their youngest son. His brother Jeff and his family, Adrian, and last but not least, Michael's oldest child, Lois, and youngest, Mitchell. Now, I've been told that I have to keep this brief, and when I started this was a lot longer, but nobody's gonna play music and get me off this stage, right? I'm here to honor Mike, and I'm gonna make sure I do that. And what he wanted was a celebration of his life and not a mourning. And so sit tight. I'll do my best to behave, but as Michael knew, and many of you, being socially correct is not my strong suit. So, that being said, I beg you for forgiveness for any transgressions. I think we all knew that Mike was struggling with cancer, but I think what we understood of that struggle was probably very different. Mike was first diagnosed with that cancer in the summer of 2017, and he fought that cancer from that day until his very last. This was substantial. He had an initial early surgery, and then began his chemo, and then had to have a second major surgery that was very substantial, the equivalent of redesigning his abdominal area. Mike would continue those treatments and believed that he was cancer-free in about April of last year. We were all excited, ready to celebrate. A trip had been planned to the main camp, and about a month later, we got the unfortunate news that Mike's fight wasn't over, that he'd been diagnosed now with cancer in his brain. That diagnosis was much different than the first, but Mike continued to fight. He fought all the way to the very end, and as you heard, he was working even up to the day before he passed away. When we talk about resilience, when we talk about strength, Mike was beyond reproach. Now, I get to speak for myself, but not just myself. I get to speak in part to his extended family of brothers and sisters in blue, both sworn and those in civilian roles that have had the privilege of working with Mike. I also get to speak for the members here of the 17th and 18th Judicial Districts that were partners with Michael in his fight for justice. I also get to speak for those here from the Arapahoe and Adams County Coroner's Office, the Denver Police Department, and so many other agencies. I think that really is a testament to Mike's reach. But most importantly, to me, I get to speak on behalf of his brothers and sister whom Mike worked with during his 8 years in the Major Crime Homicide Unit. As you heard, Mike came to Aurora in 2002 after spending roughly 6 years at LAPD, and I first met Mike in 2003. I got partnered with him on Graves, probably because he was still junior, even though a lateral, and nobody wanted to ride with me. I learned quickly that we had a lot in common. We were both Aurora boys. We had both grown up and gone to school at Colorado State University, where we both ultimately graduated. We both lived in LA, and we both believed each other was exceptionally handsome. On one particular evening, between calls, Mike and I were sharing stories and experiences out in LA. He began to talk about his time at LAPD. It wasn't one of bragging, it was just one of the fellowship and the camaraderie that he had with his colleagues and his friends there, as you've heard from the division chief, Eric, in particular. We talked about where we lived in LA and the things that just seemed to shock us in our young age. I told him where I lived, and it turned out it was the district that he policed, known as the Newton District, but more affectionately known by LAPD and those that live there as Shootin' Newton. And for good reason. In 2014, we had an opening in homicide. And we always practiced the philosophy of succession. Identify talent, then hoard it. Mike was a talent. And so I immediately went to work recruiting him to come to homicide. He had just essentially finished that promotional process, breezed through it. And that wasn't an easy task because I had already stolen Jamie Krieger from District 2. And Gary Sullivan, you're in here and can attest to this, that you weren't too happy I was poaching so much of your talent. But I did it anyways. I convinced Mike to put in, and we scooped him up. And it was without question one of my very greatest coups of my career. Mike demonstrated an eagerness and willingness to volunteer. He had a desire to be the very best that he could be. But like any person, not every day is a win. Homicide's unforgiving. It requires that you earn your blood stripe and your place amongst your peers. Some would say the environment is especially difficult, and that would be an understatement. In order to be successful there, you have to have the spirit to adapt, the ability to improvise, the dedication to overcome in the harshest of conditions. And Mike had all of that in spades. So when you're new, you're the FNG. And no matter how experienced you are, you're the FNG. And you're going to elevate your game. Mike had come there, and one of the first things we give people are warrants. Develop that skill set. And so Mike was in his first call out. It was his first homicide, and it was a very straightforward case. And so I made a wager with Matty Ingwe here that my man Mike would be able to get that warrant approved within 2 hours from the very first keystroke. Ingwe took me up on this offer, and Mike came through providing us that warrant 6 hours later. Now this was a steep bet because I now had to purchase a bottle of booze, but not any bottle of booze, one that was $250 for Detective Ingwe. And so I told Mike, you owe me. And he said, I'll pay you back. And to this day, he hasn't paid me back. So I'm going to need to see the two of you afterwards, right? Because I don't think you want your kid to be a welcher. So Mike, of course, looked forward to the day where he was an FNG. And we had another opening, and he was super excited because Jamie had come up to our unit, and Mike followed very shortly after. And that's why Gary Sullivan hated me so much. So Mike was looking forward to it. We had this opening. He had this huge smile. He couldn't wait. And then he found out who we were bringing. And it was Randy Hansen. And Mike's joy dissolved, right? Because Randy was no FNG. And Mike knew his days were still going to go on. Of course, he ultimately earned his blood stripe and his position in the unit. And he joined his fellow MCU detectives crafting the next generations that included Heath Graw, Nick Huber, Chad Lampson, a fellow academy mate of Mike's, Tim Glenn, Darian Hunt, Andy Moreno. Now, we had a ton of fun in the unit, and almost all of my fondest memories involve Mike in some fashion. One day, he was working a case, and he called all of us out. He had just gotten done interrogating a suspect in a homicide. He made the arrest, and he had confiscated some clothing. And he had this brown bag. And so he gathers us all around, and he says, you have to see this. And he pulls from the bag boots. And these weren't just any boots. They were snakeskin boots. But they weren't any snake. They were cobra. Now, you probably wonder, how do we know they were cobra? Well, that's because the boots, as they came down into the toes, it was a full taxidermied cobra in full cape in striking position on each boot. Now, pretty cool, right? So I said to him, man, those are some pretty cool snakeskin boots. And he stops me and he says, no, Matt, they're not snake, they're cobra. Yeah, I told him, cobra's a snake, bud. And I'm still impressed by your boots. I think it's ironic that the division chief here talked about Mike driving them out of the range and there was a crash, but it wasn't Mike, because Mike was a terrible, terrible driver. And in a short period of time in MCU, he stacked up 3 cars. It got to the point where jokers said, you know what, no more. He gets the worst whip in the unit. And he said, for 2 reasons. 1, right, it's punishment. And 2, we're going to get a better fleet out of this. Yeah. So, Bull, you were the smart one, and Mike was always willing to crash another car. I think it's obviously very well known for folks that have been with the department that, you know, we weren't just a collection of detectives. We were a family in the true sense. We spent so much time together at work that it almost seems crazy that we spent so much time together outside of it in our personal lives. We became extended members of each other's families, and we've been there through some very difficult things for each other. In one particular, well, not one particular, multiple instances very recently, we've had a few folks have medical issues themselves, and in the midst of this, Mike's fight against cancer, he would drive to the hospital and sit with one of us. He would show up and in the waiting room hold the hand and spend the time with one of our spouses while one of us went under surgery and fought cancer as well. Sorry. But our time together wasn't always about those situations. Sometimes they were just spending that time together living life. I think back a lot about my time with Mike and Craig Apple. We would get together at the house because our kids all the same age, right? Craig's daughter Hayden is the same age as Lois. My daughter Ella, 1 year older than the two of them. And so we would all get together, and Mitch would have to deal with all these crazy girls. And Craig and I and Mike would go for a run because Mike loved to run so much. We'd take the dogs, we'd come back, we'd make dinner, we'd have a couple vodka tonics maybe, right? Enjoy that time together. And it was there that I learned the dedication and commitment Mike always had for the two of you. How proud he was about your creativity, Lois. How impressed he was with your toughness and grit, Mitchell. Even that time where we were there at Craig's and I challenged you to a fist fight, and you wasted no time hauling off and slapping me as hard as you could in the face. I think it's really special that you both wore an outfit today that speaks to your love for your father. Mitchell decided he was going to dress up like a detective, and he's a spitting image of his dad, and I'd swear that picture was you, Mitchell. And Lois, her love of her father, she's wearing her stars and her moon and knows that her dad's still there, no longer beholden to this world. Mike was a lot of fun. He coordinated team builders like Art and Nail, golf outings where he lost most of my golf balls because he only ever borrowed my clubs. Team relays like the Colfax Marathon. Ski trips like racing with Mark Iacono and Joel Ennison. I don't recall you guys ever winning. And Rockies games. He loved it all. He also loved an opportunity to haze us. Todd Fredrickson used to go to the Rockies games with us, but he had a run-in, I think that's probably the right term, with security and maybe Troy Tulowitzki, which soured him on the Rockies, and he told us one day after that, I'm not going to any more Rockies games ever again. Todd's a man of his word. He also made himself a mark. So Prince talked, I believe, Warren Miller into decorating Fredrickson's cubicle, and there wasn't a spot that wasn't black, purple, or silver. All things Rockies. And Todd, being the good sport he was when he came to work the next day, he left it that way for the entire week. He also put up with Mike chanting, too low, repeatedly. And to this day, I believe Todd Fredrickson has never gone to a Rockies game. And I do believe you still hold and possess the Coors Field replica that was the centerpiece of your cubicle that day. Mike, of course, was reserved, quiet. He kept to himself. I think we all kind of knew Michael that way. But he was a lot of fun. He could be talked into really doing anything, any compromising act. And because I said I would not transgress too much, I won't share much of that, but I will share a little bit. We were at a particular, I don't remember which year it was, Art and Ale, and Mike had been sampling aggressively all the offerings. And Alton Reed talked him in to doing a photo shoot. Now, if you've seen the pictures, then you know, right? And if you haven't, we're not going to show them here today, I don't think. God, I hope not. But I will tell you that the feathered boa was a nice addition. Another example of Mike's willingness to entertain is Chuck Mell would routinely talk Mike into searching things on the internet. And it became a favorite phrase of ours, hey Mike, Google that shit. And Mike would absolutely do it. And then I would have to explain why a particular term was searched on a computer owned by the city, and then apologize to IT when they had to come over and remove all the viruses. He was always game for poker night, even when he, like everyone else, lost all their money to Huber and Hansen and Reed. Those guys are serious card sharks. Don't ever play with them. He loved whiskey and IPAs. He was a very unsuccessful home brewer, and he, on more than one occasion, tried to poison us to death. It was terrible stuff. He participated in the Miller Fantasy Football League that has gone on for, I don't know, 15 plus years. And aside from his contribution to the kitty, which he never won, his greatest contribution was his ever-changing team names, and they were inspired by his fight with cancer and the toll it had taken on his body. And as terrible as that sounds, they were entirely hilarious because that's how Mike was. And they were inappropriate, so I won't be sharing any of those. But Mike truly refused to be defined or pitied for his cancer. And that's why so many folks have said when we told them that Mike passed, how, why? And we're shocked to find out that he had cancer. And probably shocked today to hear that he fought it for 4 years. But I will tell you that he leveraged it. In MCU, we gave him a limited number, 10, what we called cancer cards. We're a macabre group, right? I won't apologize for that. Now, Mike could use those cards for any transgression that was illegitimate. And, you know, it would be, we thought maybe the last cookie or maybe a case he didn't want to take, but it was oftentimes just because he was being an ass to somebody. And then, of course, there would be uproar in the unit, and then Jokers and I would have to come out and arbitrate on whether it was a legitimate use of a cancer card or not. And to be frank, we loved him, right? So he never used them all. He got a whole bunch of freebies. Now I paid in a picture that we probably didn't do anything in homicide besides screw off, which we did well. We were good at it. But the reality is that homicide, you work hard, right? We routinely averaged 400 to 500 hours overtime a year per detective. That's a lot of work. The demand is real, right? Mike never shirked his responsibility. He volunteered for on-call, for cases, and he accepted ancillary duties like teaching at the academy, basic instruction, and the new sergeant's training. During his 8 years, he handled more than his fair share. I believe he handled some of Ingwe's. In the worst of conditions, at all hours, under the most difficult situations, some of great significance to the department, at sacrifice to those that loved him, Mike stepped up and he delivered. Even as his cancer raged, Mike performed at the highest level. Just this past fall, while he was being treated for his brain cancer, a very experienced chief deputy district attorney reached out to share a sentiment about Michael. That during a recent homicide case, they witnessed from Mike the very best, most prepared and comprehensive testimony they had ever seen in their life, and they were unaware that he was fighting cancer. I can say with certainty that Mike was one of the two greatest detectives I've ever had the privilege of working with or being around. For perspective, the national average currently for clearance of homicides is just below 50%. And we realize that if you're in the unit long enough, you eventually get cases that you will never be able to prove, and those unsolved cases haunt an investigator. In Mike's 8 years, he solved every single homicide. That's right. That is a clearance rate of 100%. He always strived to be better, and even as he battled his cancer, under treatment, having only missed a few weeks of work the entire 4 years, and that was after that second major surgery, Mike approached about taking on a cold case. Now, he was doing it to help Connor, and Warren Miller and Matt Ingwe said that I was going to give them the cold cases to help out Connor, but that I only chose Mike because I wanted the case solved. And it's true, I wanted it solved, and Mike solved it. And so Connor pointed out that in reality, Mike's clearance rate is 101%. Now, Mike had many nicknames in the unit: Creeper, Ball Washer, and Princess. And I'm not going to tell you how he earned those nicknames, but he earned them. But the nickname that he earned best was the greatest of all time. And so in closing, I ask each of you, hold on to those moments of shared laughter, of difficult times, success, failures, of shared vacations, whether that was the ski trips, Vegas, the Whiskey Trail, Boston, London, the camp in Maine. And remember that the three most important things a man can say is, I'm sorry, thank you, and I love you. And if Mike was here one last time, he would say to all of us, but especially to Lois and Mitch, I'm sorry I had to go. Thank you for all the memories, and I love you with all my heart. So if you're able, I ask that you stand for a moment and join me in a round of applause for the father, brother, son, friend, and detective that Michael David Prince was and will forever be. We send that to you, Goat. We'll be seeing you on the other side.
Thank you so much. That speech was wonderful. At this time, the family has called for maybe 2 or 3 more people, and for the sake of time, we're going to limit the comments to 2 minutes. But if you have anything you would like to share about Mike, anything that we haven't heard, this is now the time if you'd like to speak. Thank you, sir.
Wasn't planning on this. My name is Brian Knudsen, and I went to Regis with Mike, and also was sworn in with him at the same time when we were working task forces with the FBI. And Mike's wit and humor started at a pretty young age. We played freshman football together, and he was a fullback and I was a running back. And we ran a play, and he made an incredible block. And then another defender went to tackle me, and the defender completely missed me and fell right in front of me. And I leaped over this defender that was laying on the ground and just fell short of the goal line. And Mike and I got up, and he said, "What was that, Thumper?" I said, "I don't know. I don't even know what happened." Mike was an incredible man. It was such an awesome experience to be able to reunite with him when we were sworn in together with the FBI on the task forces. And to your family, I'm sorry that I never knew you, but he was incredible.
Thank you. Is there another? Okay. At this time, we will have a video presentation, and then we will go into the eulogy for today. So.
got my back. She'll follow me down every street, no matter what my crime.
When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Get rough, and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part. Oh, when darkness comes and
Sail on, silver girl. Sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way. See how they shine. A boy flies for freedom, but dies for the peace. In the clouds he waits for an answer, but there's no release. It's strange here without you, and it's so hard to see. So brother up in heaven, please wait up for me. Oh brother up in heaven, please wait up for me. I still see his shadow, his laugh lingers on. When I dream we're all back together, when I wake he's gone. It's strange here without you. This was not meant to be. So brother up in heaven, please wait up for me. And though we tried to change the world, a flower when it's cut will surely die. So why do men with so much hate destroy what they cannot create, while we all stand by? We look back in anger, but you helped us to see. So brother up in heaven, please wait up for me.
I saw a quote that I feel like is really fitting for today. The quote says, "Your role as a leader is to bring out the best in others, even when they know more than you." The last part of that quote says, "even when they know more than you," but I can't help but think that Mike might have known more than a lot of you. I can't help but think that he was really, really good at what he did. But I can't help also to think that Mike was one of those guys that brought the best out in everybody, even those who were farther along in their career, in the things that they thought about or the things that they did. It seems as if Mike, from what I see, spent a lot of time developing so many of us in this room. I've heard of stories of him developing and or bringing out the best or leading the way with his family and with his children, his friends, his co-workers. And it reminded me of a simple scripture that I saw that I feel like is fitting. And it simply reads this. It says in John 15, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love have no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend." And so many times you may have heard this read or quoted, but laying down of the life, I believe, is not just the death of one when somebody passes on, but I also believe that it is the sacrifice of someone in the way that they live now. It's the sacrifice of one in the way that they live at this moment. Mike, I believe, was an example of what it looks like to lay down his life for those he valued, that he cared for, his friends, his children. I've heard so many stories from the point where he was 8 years old and he threatened to rip the snout off of a wild boar if it messed with mama. And I don't blame him, because I try to do the exact same thing. I heard of stories where Mike taught his daughter how to drive in the parking lot and told her that the speed limit is more like a suggestion more than I kind of ascribe to that philosophy. I just admitted that in a room full of police officers. I might be in trouble. I heard it in that Mike would teach Mitchell how to fish and also would read history books to him, teaching him about the things of the past so that he can learn going forth into the future. I heard about his intelligence, and I heard about his wisdom and the way that he came at life. I heard about his humor and the way that he brought joy to people. I heard so many things about Mike, that he looked up to his little brother, but also led his big brother, but led the way as well, right? 24 years of law enforcement, 47 years living on this earth. And it seems like that it was such a short period of time and that it was cut short. And yet I'm still seeing the seeds being nurtured and produced in your lives right now, the seeds that he planted. The simple words, the simple laughter, the dry humor, the crazy experiences, the willingness to do things that were outside of maybe the norm or what somebody would have done. It seems to me that Michael Prince laid down his life for his friends. It seems to me that he decided to dedicate his life towards lifting others up and empowering others. Would you all agree? it seems to me that he set an example of what it looks like to live at a standard of excellence. I wrote down a couple words that I heard throughout this whole time today, but also in my time with the family. I wrote down athlete, which if you're running any kind of marathons, you are an athlete. Who else is running marathons in the room? No one else? Okay, there's like one maybe in the corner, right? You're an athlete. I heard charming, which it may have been in a quirky way, this charming behavior of him, but it was a way that kind of drew people towards him, not repelled them away. You know, I heard he was supportive father. You know, I look at some of the pictures that I just saw, and you can just see the love in him. I think probably my favorite picture is of you all doing the dab. I'm just going to let you know. That's probably, right? I heard, you know, mental toughness. You got to be mentally tough in order, first of all, to complete 100% of your caseloads. That, not only that, but to continue to endure the things that you're enduring in your body and still try to work out with excellence the life that you live. I mean, there has to be, I wrote down, because they mentioned this, that he was always on call, right? Which is an indication of the dedication that he lived with in his life, right? That he was always willing to be there for somebody when they needed. I wrote down that he was intentional, that Michael was intentional. And I love people like this, because what happens is that even the smallest of things, they're always trying to figure out the way to do it best, right? That intentionality that's there. I wrote down that he was pensive, and I saw a picture of him standing at the edge of a beach, right? And it seems as if he was looking off and thinking about life and circumstances, right? This word protective that came forth, right? Protectiveness is a characteristic that I believe that all of you all in this room share, but I believe it's also a character that God shares, right? To cover and to keep you safe from harm and danger, to make sure that you don't endure loss and or pain and or suffering, right? From protecting mom on the hike to protecting brothers and family and friends. That is a characteristic, I believe, of a man of honor. I wrote down community-minded because, first of all, in order to do any kind of law enforcement, one must be thinking about their community as a whole, willing to put others before themselves, right? And then lastly, and I wrote this down, and I thought this was important, I wrote down peacemaker. In the scripture, it talks about, it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will see God, right? And you say, well, how did he make peace? Well, in the cases that he solved, he brought peace to the families who lost loved ones. In the cases that he solved, he brought reconciliation, an understanding of what happened. That's a peacemaker. That's somebody who wants to bring a better life for somebody that's there. And I got to thinking about all of these characteristics, and I said, wow, that is the example of the way that I would like to live, and I'm pretty sure the way that you all would like to live in this room. And it seems simple, but it's actually a great task. And it was as if Michael was setting the example, planting the seed, so that we could all reap the benefits and the fruit in this room. And it seems the evidence is, looking at this room today, that everybody in this room has been impacted some way or another by his life. Whether directly or indirectly, you have been impacted. And for that, I give a round of applause. I thought the round of applause earlier was appropriate for his life. I talked to Mitchell yesterday, and he said he wants this to be a celebratory moment. I understand that there is sadness that very well may be present, but he wants this to be a celebratory moment because he wants to celebrate the life of his father. And for me, even though it is difficult to see the loss of loved ones and the suffering, I more stand in joy because knowing what Michael did for each and every one of our lives in this room. I am a better man standing today simply because of what I have learned in Michael's life for the time that he has lived. And I'm pretty sure that every single person in this room is a better man and or a woman simply by the deposit that has been set forth today. I think about that because there's a similar type of story. In the Bible, there was this man named Jesus, and he was actually sent to make our lives better, right? John 3:16, you probably have heard it so many times, and it really says, it says this: for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Effectively, that Jesus was sent and his life is a contribution so that we can have a restored relationship with God. But not only that, that we won't just have, oh, let's just go to heaven today, but we would actually have the evidence of that living in our day-to-day lives. As a believer, as a follower of Christ, I find myself asking the question, how can I make a deposit in somebody's life for the future? How can I display a life so that others may be impacted in such a way that they feel like they have become better because of me? I don't know about you all, but I wrestle with this question often. And it's easy to get stuck in the minutia of life and to condemn what you do. But I want to share words of encouragement for you today because I can see that each and every single one of you in this room, your life is a sacrifice not only to make you better, but to make others around you better. That each and every single one of you in this room, you make a deposit into somebody else's life so that they can actually live a life encountering peace, encountering maybe the reason why they're here. So many others struggle with and wrestle with this question of, am I the only one in the room that asked that question? Like, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I the only one? I must be the only one because I don't see any hands. And so apparently, look, I ask the question a lot because my desire is to make sure that what I am doing is changing lives. And I think Michael had a sense of that. I think he understood it. It was the reason why he was able to walk in such excellence in the job that he did. And I get it. We still have brokenness. We still have problems. We still have things that are challenging in our lives. Opposition, listen, nothing worth having comes without opposition, right? Right? I don't know about you all, but Michael ran, and that's a lot of opposition on his body. And I can imagine his lungs saying, hey, no, I don't want to run. And he's saying, no, you will run, right? I can imagine as he may have been doing, what did they say, 110 push-ups in 2 minutes? Who said that? Who can do 5 push-ups in 10 minutes? Okay, I can imagine, this model that was set that says, I'm willing to endure temporary suffering so that others can prosper and so that I can become better, right? The message that I see here today is very clear. Michael lived a life. He was a good gift to the both of you all, mom and dad. He was a good gift. And he was given to make you better, right? Such a gracious gift. And it seems right now that even though there's no words that can comfort, it seems like I probably lack what I need to say to give you the comfort for this loss. But I can just say to you two, thank you so much for your contribution to the world, for loving the world and loving each other enough to share the good gift of your sons in this world. Because I'm looking at one still right now who sits here and carries his brother's legacy with him, right? I'm looking at one right now that's walking and deciding to take responsibility still at this moment. And you may look at him and he looks like himself, and then he may remind you of Michael sometimes, but I still want to say to the both of you, thank you for giving us the life of your sons, because we know that the community would not be as well off as it is up to this point without their birth. Your sacrifice. Thank you, children, for loaning us your dad, right? Because guess what? The fact that you gave him to us for some time, right? That in itself, we know that we're better off because of it. And I still see the legacy of your father operating through the both of you at this moment, right? It's actually really interesting that somebody mentioned the way that you two are dressed, and it's an expression of the personalities, but it also very well may be a reflection of your father. And Mitchell, you mentioned to me yesterday that you want to become law enforcement. Is that correct? Okay, Chief, I hope you're paying attention, because, you know, right? I mean, that's the kind of result. And so today, I want you to reflect on this. Just as Michael sacrificed, right, his life, there was a man named Jesus. Historically, you can go and read it up, search whether or not it's valid, right? But the example was that he actually laid down his life for the world. And the purpose of laying his life down for the world is so that many can come to him and to his Father. And he actually gives a hope, saying simply this, that if you confess your sins, the things that we have done wrong, right? If you just say, here, God, I did that, here you go. He says this, and you believe in me, that I will be faithful enough to forgive you of your sins and extend to you something that's a great promise, which is everlasting life. And this life comes with a different set of circumstances. There's no cancer before God. There's no suffering. There's no pain. There's no tears. Instead, he says, you will enter in and you will have the joy of the Lord. And it's a simple thing, because all it says is this: hey, you don't have to earn this. All you have to do is receive this. Just like I gave a good gift to the world of giving it to you, I'm giving a good gift to you. And I'm extending to you the opportunity just to know me, right? Michael's life was an example of that. And his life was an example of what a good gift looks like for the world. And my encouragement is that as you're in this room right now, that you search your heart to see whether or not you want a good gift. I don't know about you, but if somebody handed me $100 right away, I'm not going to ask them what I need to do to earn it. I'm like, thank you, and leave. Appreciate that, right? It's a gift. I didn't do anything to earn it. God gives the good gift of us and our lives all the time, and ultimately, he has given the good gift of his son to us. So I'm sharing that with you all today, and my hope is that today it will be encouraging. I spent time praying and asking God, what will you have me say to them? And here's what I feel even at this moment. Lead well. Sacrifice your lives. Right? Build each other up. But also, I will say this: have the courage to ask your brother or sister how they're doing. Right? Walk alongside them. Help them to carry the burdens of life. Seek each other right now. Right? Get to know each other on a deeper level. Hug each other. Treat each other with love and respect. This is the encouragement that I have for you today, because God desires so much more for each and every one of us. And listen, this is not me forcing anything on you, because this, you might say, okay, chaplain, that's, I don't really go with the whole God thing. Okay, that's fine. You have the choice to do whatever you choose to do in life. But I know this, we're all made in the, I believe, in the image of God. And it's the reason why we can reflect the things that I discussed today, these characteristics that I discussed today: mental toughness, integrity, right? Intentionality, being pensive, being a protector, being a peacemaker. I believe that God has placed that in us because those are reflections of his character for the world and his heart for the world. So with that being said, I'm going to close up, and I'm going to turn it over to the honor guard, and they will continue this part of the service, and then I'll have an announcement at the end. God bless you all.
Before we move into the flag presentation, there was two presentations we wanted to do before that. As many of you in the room knew, Mike was on the road to recovery after his first diagnosis with cancer, thought he was on the mend, and had actually expressed his interest to promote to the rank of sergeant. I have no doubt, based on his intelligence and his drive, he would have been number one on any promotion process he ever took. But to honor Mike, Chief Wilson has approved the appointment of Mike to the rank of sergeant. So now Deputy Chief Parker will present Mike's parents with his sergeant badge. Mike was a phenomenal leader and mentor, and I have no doubt he would have been an exceptional sergeant, the New Aurora Police Department, and would have been a person that we all could look up to and emulate. In addition to the badge, there will be a certificate of promotion provided to the parents, along with an individual one for you, Lois, and you, Mitchell. In addition to his posthumous promotion to sergeant, I know how important his time in MCU was. There's a conference room there in the Major Crimes Homicide Unit. I know that's a special place for everyone that was an investigator in that unit. So we thought it was fitting, and Chief Wilson approved that that conference room would be renamed in Mike's honor. This plaque will be affixed within the room, and I'll read the inscription. In loving memory of Sergeant Michael Prince, August 10th, 1975, January 27, 2022. This conference room is dedicated to Sergeant Michael Prince, who passed away from a long battle with cancer. Sergeant Prince's strength, commitment, and perseverance in the pursuit of justice for homicide victims and their families will forever stand as a model of inspiration for all investigators entering this hallowed room. His determination and indelible will to fight cancer while also confronting evil in our community will live on in every investigator who answers this unique call to service and sacrifice. Members of this agency, fortunate enough to have worked alongside Sergeant Prince, saw firsthand how his passion for life fueled his unwavering drive to hold those accountable who maliciously took it. He set the bar impossibly high, but reaching forth through every homicide investigation will bring honor to him, his legacy, and every victim's family touched by his steadfast personal responsibility. And then at the bottom, there's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi: "Strength does not come from physical capacity, it comes from an indomitable will." So that will be affixed within that conference room, and there will also be a personalized one that will be presented to both you, Lois, and you, Mitchell. Thank you.
Henry 14. Henry 14. No contact with Henry 14. Stand by for tone. Sergeant Michael Prince, end of watch, January 27th, 2022. Thank you for your service and dedication. Rest easy. We have it from here.
At this time, the family will recess out. You're asked to please remain in your position until they leave the building or leave the room, and then the family has asked that you all join them for the reception afterwards outside in the lobby. That concludes today's services. Thank you so much for attending. Again, the family has requested that you join them in the lobby afterwards. Have a great day.